Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Emmanuel and to the Thompson Center. This is our second seminar of 3 seminars this fall semester here at the Emmanuel Institutes and hosted by the Thompson Community Center. Very happy to bring to you tonight a gentleman from the Sacramento, California area, Marcus Bigelow. Marcus has a long, rich history of ministry, particularly in the new church planting area. Church planting is part of Marcus's genetic makeup, going all the way back to his grandfather and through many of his relatives, his own father, and certainly even his 3 children. It's been a big part of his life. In fact, I have a book here that just recently was published that Mark is a co-author of, entitled Together, Networks and Church Planting. And it's really a groundbreaking book helping ministries around the world to understand the power of people coming together, collaborating through networks to plant churches. So thank you, Marcus, for that good work over a period of a couple of years. After planting a church himself, Marcus became the executive director of the Northern California Evangelistic Association and then became the founding president of Stadia, which is a ministry that has been operating nationally for the past 9 years, based initially out of California and now not only nationwide but becoming global with church plants in places like Paris, France, Ecuador, Israel, and other locations. In fact, Stadia has planted 54 churches in the past 2 years and nearly 125 over its life. So we owe a great debt to this gentleman for his vision and for the energy that he brought. Marcus has recently transitioned, becoming the principal of Bigelow Planning. He is now officially a certified facilitator of the life plan process out of the Patterson Center in Littleton, Colorado. And that is what our seminar is about tonight. Now, you have to understand that normally when Marcus does a life plan presentation, it is spread over 2 days that are very intense and very full. 16 hours would be a minimum. And we're spending only 14 hours tonight. So, right, 2 hours tonight. So you're going to get what we hope, and certainly what Marcus intends, to be a good overview of the process. Many of you have secured a copy of Tom Patterson's book, Living the Life You Were Meant to Live. This book is rather difficult to secure through Amazon and other channels. We appreciate Marcus making special arrangements to have it for us and have it at such a reasonable price. He'll explain how the use of this book could actually enable you to go through the life planning process, maybe not quite as completely and maybe even as effectively as if you had a certified facilitator assisting you, but it has that potential. So Marcus, thank you so much for coming all the way across the country to spend today with us. And Marcus will conclude his time here at Emmanuel by preaching in our chapel tomorrow morning before he flies back to California. If you are here as one of the students in CMF 5010, if you would simply write 5010 on your registration form tonight, because you've already paid your registration through the purchase of the book in the bookstore, and that'll help us keep our record straight. The rest of you, if you did not have time to fill out a registration before we began here this evening, do fill that out and drop it off at the registration table where we came in. You also have an evaluation form that we take very seriously and look at it with great care. We'll look forward to receiving that from each of you at the end of the seminar. You can just drop it off again at the table, and I'm sure Marcus will appreciate seeing that feedback as much as we will. Thank you all for being here, and Marcus, thank you very much for coming. Let's welcome Mark Bigelow.
You should always hold applause till the thing's over with, so you know whether you really want to applaud or not. I got involved in the life planning process about 2 years ago when a friend of mine said, you really need to go get a life plan. He had just come back from getting a life plan done. And I was at the point of really questioning where I was going in my career at the time. And so I went and did a life plan. I went thinking I was leaving Stadia and thinking for sure I was going to make an application to do another job. And when I got done with the life plan, it became totally apparent that I was in the right place and I just needed to make a couple of changes. And so I became a firm believer in the life plan. It just really revolutionized my life. I went and lost 30 pounds as a result of it. I can't guarantee the results. You know, these are trained actors that are doing this. No. But because some things really began to click and make sense in my life. And so I then went back and became a facilitator, and over the past year and a half or so, I've done 10 or 11, 12 life plans, and now feel God's call to be doing this on a full-time basis. So I want to just talk a little bit tonight about understanding God's purpose for your life. There's scriptures throughout the Bible about planning. God says, I have plans to give you a future filled with hope. And we kind of take it for granted that God wants some good stuff for us, but sometimes it gets lost in the shuffle of our life. In Philippians, Paul says, I'm sure this very thing, that the one who began a good work in you will perfect it until the day of Christ Jesus. And I could go on and on with additional scriptures about planning and God using plans. If you're reading through the book, you'll find a number of them spread throughout the book. But part of my passion comes because as Dorothy Canfield said, most of us spend more time planning a 2-week vacation than we do planning our lives. You know, if you came home and said, we're going on vacation, and somebody said, well, where are we going? Well, I don't know. What kind of clothes should I pack? Well, I don't know. Depends on where we go. Well, where are we going? I don't know. And yet we kind of do that with our life, don't we? We kind of say, where's your life headed? We go, I don't know. And then we say, well, what should I pack? I don't know. Well, where are we headed? I don't know. And we kind of go around this little loop here that kind of keeps going around and around. So this has become the thing that's really given me passion. Our life is like orienteering more than driving down a freeway. Anybody done orienteering? A couple of you. You know, you kind of say, okay, there's a place I want to go, and I've got a compass, or now you have a GPS. How can I get there? And so you take off across the wilderness, and you just kind of mosey like this. There's no set trail. You just kind of try to figure your way to get across there. But it helps to have something to guide you as you go along the way. And I think a life plan is kind of like that, because rarely does life go between point A and point B. Instead, it's a series of midpoint corrections. And you know, last summer, as a reward for working out for a year and losing 30 pounds, I went on a 33-mile backpack trip. The last mile and a half as we got up to our destination was a place where there was no trails. It's 2 lakes that nobody ever goes to. And we were the first people to visit that year. And so we went up the hill, and then we had to backtrack a little bit because we ran into a dead end where there was a cliff in front of us. And so we backtracked a little bit. We knew generally where we were going. And isn't that kind of how life is for you? That, you know, it's not like you get on a freeway and it says this way to Asheville. And you just stay on it till a sign says this way to Atlanta. It's more like you go along in life and you kind of try to figure out where you're going. And there's a series of midpoint corrections that kind of make us, bring us to our final destination. And it's help in making those midpoint corrections that a life plan is really helpful at. We always tell people that what you gain in a life plan is, first of all, clarity of purpose. And you'll find a lot of this in the book as you're reading through the book. But clarity of purpose. Why do I exist? In fact, these are charts from a person I did a life plan for who gave me permission. Everything we do in a life plan is always confidential, but he gave me permission to bring his charts and put them up. But over there on that strategic life panel, one of the exercises we do is, why do I exist? And what then is my purpose, and what must I do to accomplish these things? And sometimes we don't know, why do I exist, and what must I do in order to end my life feeling successful? It brings focus. It helps you say yes to the right things and no to the right things, or no to the wrong things, I guess would be a better way to put that. And so there's a focus there. It brings help in decision making. One of the charts, and when we take a break, as we're coming back, I'm going to hang around these charts, and I'd encourage you to kind of look around, walk around, and look at the charts, because there's something about seeing our life up on a wall, mapped out, But over there on that wall over there are some decision-making matrices, constructs that we use to help people clarify, do I stay here? Do I go someplace else? If I have 3 options, which is the best option? And so a life plan helps you do some of that kind of decision-making. And then there's always seems to come out of it a sense of God being involved in our whole life. I've never yet done a life plan where people didn't get done with this chart that goes back under here as we mapped out their whole life, and they're saying, wow, clear back here when I was 8 years old, God was already working. And here when I was 26, God was really working. And here when I was 35, even though I wasn't a Christian yet, God was really working. And then I became a Christian at 42, and suddenly everything began to make sense. God had been working all along, calling me to Him. And constantly we find this happening as we begin to look for look at people's life. And then a conviction about what we believe and about where we're going are the things that really come out of a life plan. And I do one process. It's not the only process. In fact, I want to acquaint you with a number of processes tonight because I think it's fair to say that not one size does not fit all. And so I'll introduce a number of things along the way. And then I think accompanied with conviction and all those kind of things is a boldness that comes into your life where you say, I know where I'm going, I know what I'm supposed to be doing, therefore I can stand up and be counted. I did a life plan for a young man, he's 35 or 40, feels young to me, and he said, I was always taught that I'm supposed to be humble. But I really believe God wants us to plant a church in every major city in Europe. But when I say that, it sounds like I'm bragging. And as we began to unpack this, we said, if God's calling you to do it, it's not bragging, it's obedience. And out of that has come a boldness to push ahead with his organization to say, we're going to take Europe, and we're going to go to every major city in Europe. And before he was intimidated by it because he didn't want to appear like he was arrogant or anything like that. And so those are some of the benefits that I think that come out of a life plan is a sense of clarity and focus and boldness and all that kind of thing. Doug Foltz is a fellow that I did a life plan for and gave us this quote. He said, the life process confirmed for me that I was in the right place in ministry, but the real aha came a year later when I was offered a new job opportunity. On paper, it sounded like a great career move. But through the lens of my life plan, I was able to see that it was not a fit for who God had created me to be. So it helps a person kind of get that focus, get that decision-making ability. Greg Nettle, who is now the president of Stadia, my successor, said, my wife and I are raving fans of the life process. And I didn't do his life plan, but he's a big fan of it. He says, not only has it shed light on our understanding of events in our past, but it's clarified where we can best invest our time, talents, and energy in the future. God can direct us wherever and whenever He chooses, but with our life plan, we can better discern His voice as He calls us. Much of the outside noise has been removed. You ever get that sense that there's a lot of static on your channel as you listen to God? And you wish, I bet I've said a million times, I wish God would send the Goodyear blimp over with a message on it for me. Well, this is kind of one of God's Goodyear blimps as a way of being able to pick that up. Rick Warren, who Tom Patterson, the fellow who wrote your book, did his life plan, said, by nature we all tend to live unbalanced lives. Life planning is a tool for reorganizing your life around what really matters. And his process was so helpful to me that I insisted all my senior staff go through the process. And actually out of Rick Warren's life plan came the book Purpose Driven Life because it made such an impact on him as he did the life plan. And then Bob Buford, some of you may know Bob Buford, who founded Leadership Network and Halftime and a number of other things, says, I know numerous people who think Tom Patterson's life planning process is magic. He came back with a new sense of vision, sense of purpose for their lives, and they discovered how to position themselves to make a difference. And I think that maybe that last sentence is where, for most of us, we're at. You're here at seminary because you want to make a difference. You're not here because you want to make $1 million. If you are, you need counseling. You're here because you want to make a difference in the lives of a lot of people. And finding a life plan that figures out how to get you focused to make the biggest impact in the smallest amount of time is really important, I think. Now, let me tell you a free resource. Michael Hyatt and you should write this down. Michael Hyatt is the only blogger I read every day. It's the best leadership blog, I think, out there. And he used to be the president or the CEO of Thomas Nelson Publishers. Now he's a speaker and things. But he's written a book called Creating Your Personal Life Plan. If you go to his website and sign up for his blog, you can download a free copy. It's a good book. If you want to take a look at it, John was kind enough to download a copy and has a copy over here. You can kind of thumb through it. And I think it's worth, if it fits you, it's a great book. But it doesn't fit everybody. And so I would encourage you to at least take a look at it. I mean, the price is right. So, and it's one of those places where you actually get something that's worth something, even though it's free. Now, how does a life plan process work? And by the way, if you have questions as we're going along, I mean, I'm kind of shooting at you pretty fast. So if you need to, if you want to say, hey, stop, I need to ask a question about that, feel free to raise your hand. If I don't think we can deal with it in a timely manner, I'll say, let's talk at the break, but feel free to ask a question and raise your hand. The process works like this. Americans like to go from point A to point B. Here we are. We got to get here. That's efficient, but sometimes it's not effective. The life planning process is nonlinear. Instead, it's more like this circle. And this is kind of a Chinese way of thinking of taking a circle, taking another lap, and taking another lap around your life. And in a life plan, we take 8 laps around a person's life and look at it from a number of different perspectives until we get a better picture, a more accurate picture. It's slower, but it may be more accurate when we actually get done. And so that spiral, if you did a life plan with me, we'd come back to that spiral many times and I'd say, okay, let's take another lap. And ultimately, if you look over on that chart over there with the green dots and green and yellow dots on it, the lenses we look at are my life story, my talents, my heart, my way of thinking, my frontal lobe, and that won't mean anything to you until we go through that chart, my purpose, my vision, my mission, and then my core values. And we look at all those kind of things in a person's life and say, so if God has designed you like this, then maybe here's some conclusions we can draw about where you go next. You can look at me and tell that God did not design me to be a ballerina. Ballerinas usually aren't 6'3", 285 pounds. It just doesn't work, Dancing elephant maybe, but not a ballerina. And so part of it, as we look a circle around a person's life, we begin to get a picture of, okay, this is who God has really designed me to be. This is how I'm gifted. This is how I'm wired. And it's a discovery-based process where you make all the discoveries. I don't think I've ever done a life plan where somebody said, I never knew that. It's more, I just have never connected the dots. And that's the biggest part of a life plan is we help people connect the dots together. We begin with perspective. In a 2-day process, if I do a life plan, it's you and me for 2 days, from 8 in the morning till 5 or 6 at night, including lunch. And I am, first of all, for the first 12 or 13 of our 16 or 17 hours together, it's all about perspective. How did you get to where you are now? How are you designed by God? Where are you now? And then the last 3 or 4 hours is, okay, so now that we figured out where you come from and how you got there, now let's figure out what the next steps are. And it's amazing how, if you've done the homework on that perspective, the rest of the planning comes really easy. It's a guided kind of thing. One of the things I would encourage you, and as we get done at the end, I'm going to tell you, if you're going to try to do a life plan by yourself, and you can do it, you need somebody to help ask you the hard questions. Because life planning is all about truth. And we're good at talking ourselves out of truth. And so you need to find a partner. If you're going to try to do a life plan yourself, I would say you need to find a partner. And you can go through this Living the Life You Were Meant to Live book. You can go through the Michael Hyatt book. But you need to do it with somebody who will hold you accountable and hold your feet to the fire and not let you get away with sloughing off. Because we all slough off on certain areas. And so you need somebody that helps guide you through the process. But a life plan is not counseling. It's not psychological counseling. If somebody comes to me and says, I need a life plan because my wife just left me, I say, you don't really need me right now. You need to first go ahead and go through some counseling and get figured out how to live your life, and then come back and we'll talk. So that's kind of the process of life planning. In your handout, I think we're actually getting into the handouts at this point. The first part of it is the perspective. Where am I now? That all leads up to getting that whole thing of where am I now. Then comes the planning, which is what's important now. You need to figure out what is the next steps, or what are the next steps that you need to take. And normally we come up with 6 to 8 steps that a person needs to move ahead in. Then comes life plan management, and the question is, how am I doing? When you finish a life plan, you not only need a partner to help you go through it, but you need somebody who's a partner who will ask you, how you doing? My accountability partner and I, every 2 weeks, we go through life plan together. And so we bring our life plans to our accountability meeting every Sunday morning, and we go through it and we say, how you doing? What's going on? Because our lives are constantly changing, and when you set up a life plan, it's a static kind of a thing that in the first month after you set up a life plan, you'll probably accomplish half of what you thought it would take 3 years for you to accomplish. It's amazing how things that have been blockages for you suddenly come apart. But you need somebody to help you manage it. And then you need to renew it, because a life plan is a constantly changing kind of a thing. Now, you're not going to change drastically, I hope. If you in 1 year, if your life plan is totally out of date, then somebody screwed up on the first go-around of it. But you'll accomplish things, and God will move on. I mean, when I finished my life plan 2 years ago, my life plan said, you're going to stay with Stadia till you die. Well, I haven't died, but I'm no longer with Stadia. So I'm having to do some life plan renewal and say, okay, so God has the right to change my plans. Now what's he telling me, and what am I doing? And so it's one of those things that is a continual process. When we do a life plan, there's 5 domains. And again, there's one in your sheet. The first one is personal. And in order to do an effective life plan, I really think it needs to address all 5 of these areas. The first one is personal, and that includes your physical, your emotional, and your spiritual life. That's a big category. And you'll find that most of the things you do in a life plan really fall into 3 categories. Personal, the next one is family, and then the third one is work. And those 3 categories take up the bulk of our life plan, because those are the 3 areas that are most operative in our lives. Now, a 4th one is church, and then the 5th one is community. If you're a pastor, or you're a church worker, a youth minister or something, work and church and community often get blurred. And sometimes I will say to a guy, it's okay. Because that's the way it works. Sometimes I'll say, you need to put a better boundary between church and work, because there may be some confusion, some ramping over. And so sometimes I say to guys, it's okay for you to blend all this together. And then sometimes I'll say, no, you need to figure out how to separate out community from your church and from your work. And that's one of those things where it's not a cookie cutter plan. Everybody's a little bit different, and everybody needs, that's part of, I guess, the art of life planning is being sensitive to where a person is at their particular time in life. Just ask a question. Which do you think is the most confused when people come to do a life plan?
Personal.
What? Personal? Okay. Work?
Say it depends on what they do for a living.
All right, probably, yeah, you're right. I mean, I recently did a CEO of a company. He didn't have any problem defining community. But almost every pastor I work with has a problem defining what community means, including me when I did my life plan. I think it's probably, this is the most confused, this is the one we feel most guilty about. And this is the one that causes us the most grief. These all kind of vie, and it'll vary. But I think the personal, because it's such a big category, probably is the one that we end up working the most on. I don't know why I keep trying to sync. Now, one of the first tools we do as we begin a life plan is this 4 helpful list, and you have a copy of it in your thing. If you're in the ministry anywhere, this is a great management tool. If you're a youth minister, and you call all your sponsors together, you can whip out this sheet and say, okay, so guys, let's talk about our youth ministry. What's right that we need to add to, or we need to optimize? What's wrong that we need to change? What's confused that we need to clarify, and what's missing that we need to add? And you've got a great tool for helping you manage a ministry. You can go with your wife, you can say, or your husband, and say, honey, let's clarify this. You got to have a good relationship with your spouse before you do this. But you can say, what's right about our marriage? What needs to be changed about our marriage? That could be a little bit dicey. What's confused and what's missing? And you can do it with your kids. You can do it. There's all kinds of ways that you can use this tool, but we use it with our own personal life. Every time, this is the one piece of homework that I send guys out with, or send to guys before we do a life plan. I say, I want you to come having thought through this. Almost always when they come back in, they go, and we actually work through it in our time together. It's changed in 2 or 3 weeks since they first did it. But this is an ongoing document that I would encourage you to always think through. If you're wrestling with a decision, or this is a really helpful kind of thing to say, what's right that I need to add to? What's wrong that I need to change? What's confused that I need to clarify? And what's missing that I need to add? And I would encourage you to take this sheet and try it in the next 2 weeks with somebody. Find a situation that it'll fit and try it. Because if you do that, I think you'll find that this is a sheet that you can use across the board in any number of places in your life. I've used it with our staff. And it's a very helpful kind of a tool. So that's how did I get where I am? Or that's the first part of how did I get where I am. The next thing we do is we have them begin to list out their turning points. This happens to be my life plan. There's not a handout for this. It's in the book. You can talk about, it'll tell you how to figure out what turning points are in your life. Because some things are just memorable, but they're not a place where you could never turn around and go back from it again. And so, this was mine. At 9, I was baptized. At 14, I was on a backpack trip with some underprivileged kids, and they bullied me and pulled a knife on me, and I didn't fight back. And you'd say, well, that's not a very big turning point. It affected everything else I did in my life. I have never met a conflict that I wanted to go into. And it affected almost every part of my life until I realized and I finally had to take it out and examine it and say, all right, I got to grow some backbone here. I got to get tough. And so then, I went to Denmark and walked away from the Lord for a while as an exchange student, and woke up in the middle of my life and said, or in the middle of the night and said, I'm missing something. I got to turn back to God. And that was a real turning point of where my faith became my own and wasn't just a family faith. Got called into ministry instead of designing computers, married my wife. Our first daughter was born. Your first child is always a turning point because your life's never the same. Sometimes your second child isn't a turning point because it's just round 2. Not that they're not memorable and important, but your life doesn't drastically change like it does that first child. Went to work for San Jose Bible College. We had a daughter who died. I spent a year totally angry at God. And those of you in chapel tomorrow, I apologize because some of this is going to come out in our chapel tomorrow. But we map out the turning points of our lives. And it's the good, the bad, the ugly. Sometimes it's job stuff. Sometimes it's family stuff. Sometimes it's personal. And you map that out. And then we take and we put it on a chart that goes across. And actually, when break's on, we'll move it up. Because this is one of the most interesting charts that we have And I've never yet had a person who's charted out their life say, all these were just individual events, and now I see them in context. And so we put kind of eras to them, like preparation and regrouping and baby Christian, and then blessings. This was this friend of mine that I did a life plan for. He had some what we call life gates. And a life gate usually affects almost all of our areas of life, more than a turning point. It's such a cataclysmic kind of a thing that we never can even begin. I mean, our whole direction of life changes. And so one was when he got pulled. He was the youngest firefighter that ever be a captain. Fell through a roof in a fire, and because of that, he got pulled off of the engine and no longer could be a fireman. It was the death of a dream. Everything in his life had pointed to being a fireman for the first 35 years of his life. And suddenly that was gone. When he became a Christian, that was another dramatic turning point. He became one of the most committed Christians I've ever seen. And we trace then the ups and the downs of our lives and where God takes us. And it's just one of those things that when you see your life, not just as a series of individual events, but as a tapestry, as a book that God is writing, and how He's putting the things together in your life, it's powerful. It's a life-changing experience. Almost always the Kleenex come out about the time we finish this, and it takes us about 4 hours to do that. If you're going to do this with a partner, this is not something you're going to whip out in an hour and 10 minutes. This is something that's going to take you hours to do. Then we spend some time working on heart and talent, trying to figure out where we are. This is one of those kind of sheets that this is an hour and 3/4 worth of work to work through. These are all, and in the book, these are all listed out. They kind of give you some directions and questions to ask. But these are all clues working to come up with what are my talents and what are my heart. What's my heart? What am I passionate about? What do I really want to accomplish with my life? Ultimately, culminating with the question, what is my opus gloria? What is my highest good that I could accomplish with my life? What do I want on my tombstone? When you get done with your life, what do you want to have said? And this one happens to be mine. When I got done with it, I said I want to be known as caring, sold out to Jesus, and the best grandpa ever. Because it reflected a number of values that were coming up through some of these kind of things. And then out of that, out of your talents and your heart, we then say, so in each of these areas, what does this mean? We ask you to come up with some messages. And so in a personal, I long to be more intimately connected to God. I'm not a mystic. I have a hard time maintaining a strong devotional life. And so it's a constant challenge for me. And every time I go through one of these things, I realize I love Jesus completely. I'm willing to die for him. I'm willing to let my daughter die for him. We were talking about that at dinner tonight. But I have a hard time maintaining that intimate connection with Jesus. And if I don't maintain it, it affects every other area of my life. The message to my family was I need to intentionally apply my talents to my family of being a leader, of being a spiritual entrepreneur, connector, and those kind of things. I need to focus my activities to optimize my talent. I need a church that refuels us where I can maximize my talents. And there's a bigger world out there beyond the Christian church, and so what does this mean for me? And so, the whole thing is to get a view of how has God designed you? What are the experiences he's taken through? Then, what are the heart and passion? And those become drivers in our lives. And then we do a thing called the thinking wavelength. And I want to walk us through it. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being over here on concrete and 10 being over here on the abstract side. In terms of risk taking, 1 being risk averse, 10 being risk embracing, where would you be on a scale of 1 to 10? Just go ahead and write a number on your thing. And if you're like a 6, kind of put it over about here, but up here along the top. Write what number you are in terms of risk. Adverse to risk, embraces risk. Got that? In terms of change, welcomes change, resists change. Where are you? 1 to 10 scale. 1 being resists change, 10 being welcomes change. You know, my wife is a 1. I'm a 10. Sometimes we meet in the middle. But, you know, if I could change, I'd change everything every day if I could. That's just fun. Some of you are looking at me like, you crazy man. Okay. In terms of few variables in your life or many variables, do you like a lot of balls in the air at one time, or do you want to have one big ball that you're focused on? Scale of 1 to 10, write a number down there. Okay, in terms of how you accomplish things, 1 step at a time, A to B to C to D, or many quantum leaps, A through M and then Z. 1 being 1 step at a time. Where do you fit on that continuum there?
You mean like you think 1 step at a time, or you act 1 step at a time?
It's where you like to function. I mean, sometimes we have to take these big leaps, but some of us don't like to take big leaps. So where do you like to function? Is it 1 step at a time, or is it taking big leaps and jumping from point A to point M to point Z? Because why waste the time with B, C, and D? No. All right. In terms of ambiguity, do you have a low tolerance for ambiguity or a high tolerance for ambiguity? And finally, are you problem task oriented or opportunity oriented? You know, some people see everything as a task to be done or a problem to be solved. Other people never saw a problem that wasn't an opportunity to change things. And you can we all fit someplace on that continuum. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you fit on that? Okay, now, add those up and divide by 6. I know math, it's a hard thing for seminary students, right? Yeah.
I don't understand the last one.
How is it we approach life? Let's see if I can come up with a great killer illustration of it. We walk in tonight and the projector won't work. Is that a problem, or is it an opportunity for us to figure out another way to do it? I mean, that's probably not a good illustration of it. Can somebody else help me? Because frankly, I've never been asked that question before. I've been asked on all the other ones, but I've never been asked that one before. That's okay.
Huge conflict comes up in staff.
Okay.
And 2 people who have 2 different ways of solving problems.
Yeah.
Is that an opportunity to create new ways of working together, or is JoJo being the pain in the butt?
Okay. Or do we have to figure out how to get Joe and Sally back together again because they're now in a, so is solve it or change it? Yeah, that might be the right words to use there. Thank you. I'll use that next time. Thank you. All right. So tell me what did you come up with your numbers? 6? 4, 6. Okay. Mark that on your chart here. Put your number down here. Somebody else. 4. Okay. 7? 7? 4 and 4 and 4 and 5 point or 4.56? Okay, all right. 3, okay.
5, 8.
5, 8. 9.5. 9.5, okay. Let's have a party. All right. Any others? 3, 5. Okay, now, let me ask you another question. where on this scale, if life was perfect and you had your choice, where would you want to spend your life? Where on that scale would you want to spend your life? I mean, just figure out a number that you think would be the ideal place to be in your life. Now, it's different for everybody. Some people are saying, well, of course, it's a 5. And I'm thinking, I would never want to be a 5. And other people are saying, well, it's a 3, stupid. And I'm thinking, no, it's a 7.8. The challenge is, if your ideal spot is more than 2 numbers from where you came out, like if you're a 3 and you came out as a 7 for your ideal, then you need to really think about where you are in your life and do some thinking to it. Now, they've come up with some names for people who fit into this. Somebody who's a 1 or a 2 is a minder, also known as a detailer. And you have to have people like this or the world stops, because if the world is like me as an 8, we're going to have a party, but we'll forget the balloons and the food and the cake. So you need minders. And my wife is a minder. She's about a 2. She thinks minders are the place to live. And a true minder just loves being there. Then there's keepers. They're the ones who they're a little more abstract, but they're pretty still much going to be over here on this side. They would be the shift leader at a McDonald's. They're going to keep everybody going. They're going to make sure that all the things are figured out. But they're not going to go start a new McDonald's. Then there's the builders, and this is the kind of the mid-range, COO of a company, executive pastor of a church, academic dean, possibly. I don't, Heather, you might want to run this by Jack. Okay. Then finders are the people that oftentimes are the CEOs of companies, visionary senior pastors, those kind of things, because they love all that stuff over there on that side. And then finally there's the conceivers. I was trying to figure out how you could float that in, because conceivers are kind of the absent-minded professor who's always out there figuring out the latest thing but has no practical application to it whatsoever. And they're great to be around, but they won't get anything done. They keep us going and keep new ideas coming. Now, we need all of those, but you just need to realize where you fit in that whole thing, because anything on this side of 5 probably needs to focus on administrative and operational. You're not going to be happy just thinking big thoughts. You're going to want to get something accomplished. And you're going to want to make sure that there's some concrete things that are happening. People on this side, they never met a detail they could recognize, let alone like. And so people over here need people over here. In fact, one of my life gates, when I went through the vocational gating process, was said, if I'm going to have a job, I have to have some administrative support or I'm dead. I'm just not going to be effective. I can do stuff, but even when I proofread something 3 times, there's still typos in it, because who cares about typos? Professors do. On the other hand, somebody over here really needs somebody over here, because otherwise they will stay in the same place. They will be content. Somebody who's a 1 or a 2 will be content to work in the same place, doing the same job for 30 years. And they will never make progress to find new ways of doing things. And so we need each other along this way. Now, how does this apply to life planning? If you're in a job that says you have to be a 7 because you're called to be a visionary, and you're really a 3.8, you're not going to be happy. You're going to be frustrated. If you're in a job, if you're a 7 and you're in a job over here that says you need to be a 2, you're going to be frustrated out of your mind, and you're not going to do it very well. And so part of the thing that, as we sit in life planning, is saying, okay, God designed your thinking skills. You need to figure out how to use those in the way that God has designed you. And so some of you are saying, well, I'm a 3.8. that probably means that you need to be in some kind of an operational job where you can have your hands on the details. You can be making something happen. You can be in the nitty-gritty. The best illustration I saw was I was in a meeting 2 weeks ago where I was training to do strategic opportunity plans, and the CEO and the president of a company came in. And the CEO is about an 8.5, and the president is about a 4. And the CEO hired the president because he knew when he reviews strategic opportunity plans, after about 2 hours, he walks out of the room because he can't handle it anymore. The president, on the other hand, spends all day long going through the details because he knows how important it is for those details to be worked right. And so you need to find a place of ministry and service or work where you can work with your thinking wavelength. Sitting a little longer on this one because this is one we can do in the seminar together, and I think it's easy for you to kind of grasp how that works. Yeah?
What do you do if you're almost exactly at 5?
That's okay, because you'll have what we do. Let's see, where did that chart go? Here's my buddy's chart. He is the red, and you have a range of effectiveness. And so that means that, if you're exactly a 5, that means you'll have some ideas sometimes when you really function well on the visionary side of things and the abstract kind of things. But you're also going to have to get your hands dirty and get some stuff done. If you're in a job that's just a visionary job, you're not going to be happy. This is a great COO of a company. This is an operations officer. This is a great vice president in a staff or a executive pastor, pastor of a small church with a small staff. But if you're in a church of 5,000 and you're a 5 as the senior pastor, you're probably going to be frustrated because you're going to be wanting to do stuff all the time down in the trenches, and the guys in the trenches are going to be saying, "Get out of here, leave me alone." This is his wife. And it's a good balance because he handles all the vision and all the new ideas, and she handles making it happen. And it really works well. And I find most times couples are opposites. Now, what it means is that she has to learn to appreciate his high-flying stuff, and he has to learn to appreciate that she keeps him honest. My wife drives me crazy sometimes because she wants to have the details taken care of. I mean, if we're going on vacation, she wants to know where we're going, how we're going to get there, how many hours it's going to take, what kind of clothes we're going to pack, where we're going to eat along the way, and what hotel we're going to stay in, and what time we'll get to the hotel, and will the room be clean. I want to go to Tahoe. Who cares about the rest of that stuff? We get to Tahoe, it'll figure itself out. I need her. Because otherwise we'll get to Tahoe and we'll be staying at some dump motel. And she needs me because otherwise she'd never get to Tahoe. She'd stay home. Yeah?
Mark, would it be fair to say that if you're a keeper, but there are aspects of your work that require you to be more strategic, more of a finder, that you can do the finding, but it's more draining on your system, and it will require additional time to replenish it and recoup. Whereas if you're operating in your sweet spot, you might be able to go for a very long time without feeling good.
How many of you have a problem with procrastination from time to time? Yeah. Chances are it's for something that's outside of your sweet spot. Now, I don't have anybody right now. I'm brand new in this life planning business. And so I don't have anybody to type up all these sheets. These all get typed up and put into a binder. I have to do that right now. I procrastinate, and I have to work myself up to it. I have to have my wife bring me a root beer float halfway through the day. And then I have to go take a break. Because that detail work just kills me. I can do it. I mean, I get these done eventually. But my secretary, who used to be my administrator when I was with Stadia, she'd just sit there. She thought it was fun to do these, and she'd come to work saying, "Okay, I get to do a life plan today." And I'm going, "Oh, okay, I got to do a life plan today." Yeah, I can do it. You can do it. You can function outside of your strength. But if you're trapped there for a long period of time, you're going to be unhappy. You're going to be drained. So, does that make sense? All right. For me, this is one of those fun exercises, and when we do it, I always bring the wife in if I possibly can, if she's close by, and we do this kind of thing. We've done it on Skype where we'll show the camera at the thing and say, so where do you think you fit? And almost always it helps a couple figure out, okay, that's why we fight over where we're going to go to dinner tonight, because she wants to know all the details and I just want to figure out how to get out of the house. So it really does help a couple figure it out. If you have staff people that you work with, you need to. This is a helpful kind of a thing, because if you've got the wrong person, the right person in the wrong seat on your team, they're going to be giving you trouble. You got a group of youth sponsors that you're working with, and you got one person who just is always wrestling with, why do we have to do things this way? Chances are you're asking them to be in a position that doesn't really fit them in the way they think. And if you can figure out how they think, you can help them become much more productive and happy in the process. Yeah.
Mark, I've heard churches say, and I've heard people that have this sort of luxury of church when they're looking for staff folks. Sometimes, and I heard Tom Jones say this all the time, talk about hire the person and then find them a job. And it makes sense to me that you would seek out a certain type of personality that you knew your team needed, right? You know your team needs a person that can get details done. You need somebody that can dream. You need somebody that can push through the hard stuff, whatever. And I see the intelligence of hiring somebody that you know is a quality person that you need and then shaping their ministry assignment around.
There's two ways to do it. That's one way. The other way is if you need a typist, a clerk typist, don't hire me, because you're going to be unhappy. So if you know a job requires a specific kind of a focus, hire for that. Hire somebody that's their strength rather than that's their weakness. And so I think that, but yeah, it's what Jim Collins said, is you get the right people on the bus and then you get them in the right seat. And many times if you've got somebody who's really giving you grief in a staff situation, it's because they're in the wrong seat. They may be the right person, but they may be sitting in the wrong place on the bus, and you've asked them to be administrative and they're really visionary, or you've asked them to be visionary and they'd really rather be typing a report. I mean, and I'm using extremes here, but help people figure that out. In the flow of a life plan with a person, the 4 helpful questions takes about an hour and a half. The profile takes about 4 hours, and we've been working hard. And then we do the talent heart assessment, and that takes an hour and a half, and we're still working hard. Then it comes to this thinking wavelength. It's kind of like recess, because it goes, you go through it pretty quickly. And then this next one is also one that we call the frontal lobe discovery. And again, they've identified 4 primary drivers in our lives that people have motivations. One is primary leadership. A person who's a primary leader has to lead. This fellow over here, every job he ever had, he ended up being a leader of it. When he became a fireman, by the time he was 23, he was the youngest fire captain in the history of the Vacaville Fire Department. And then he was on his way to becoming the fire chief for the city until he fell through the roof. When he became a Christian, within 6 months, he was leading 100 Awana leaders, because his leadership stuff just comes out. He's a primary leader. He starts companies. He's always the CEO of the company. And he just has to be leading something. Some of you, that may be your leadership style. A secondary leadership style is a guy who says, I want to lead, but I don't have to be the lead dog. I can lead a department, or I can lead a sub ministry, but I still got to lead something. I just don't have to be the big dog. Now, a big dog, a primary leader will say, that you've seen that big dog shirt that says, if you're not the lead dog, the scenery is always the same. That's a primary leader who wrote that. But a secondary leader can say, I can do that okay. I can follow somebody, but I got to have a chance to make a little difference on my own. Then there's people who are image or presentation is another way that it's put. Marketing people are almost always driven by image. They want to make things look right. I had a senior pastor who I did a life plan for. He's a great guy, one of my best buds, and I'm kind of his mentor. He's younger than me. But image is his thing. Presentation is his thing. And leadership. I wouldn't get him. He kind of wanted to weasel out of that one. I said, no, you're a leader too. But he once fired a worship leader because after repeated conflict, he could not get the words on the screen to match what they were singing in the church. And he said, every time you sing something that's not on the screen, all the visitors get lost and they lose their chance to see it. It has to be right for people who are coming to see Jesus Christ. It's not a selfish thing. It's not a pride thing, I want to look good. It's the image means something. Now me, I can go to Men's Warehouse and get a $700 suit and make it look like it came out of Salvation Army. Without any trying. Image, I don't care. It fits on the screen. So what if it doesn't, if the color clashes? But for somebody whose image, that'd drive them crazy. Then there's people whose drivers, I just want to make a difference. I want to have a contribution in life. Mother Teresa is a good example of somebody. She was a leader, but she just wanted to make a contribution. She wanted a dying person in Calcutta to know the love of Jesus Christ in a practical way. So I'd say circle the one that you think is your best guess at what you are. Because all of us seem to fit into one of these four categories in some way, shape, or form. All right, now go to the other side. We have some comfort zones. Primary ideas are they got to think deep thoughts. They're the philosophers. They're the ones who come up with, they always have to be inventing something new. I don't care about inventing something new. But I need people who do come up with new things so I can steal them. We need people who are primary idea kind of people. They're the researchers of the world. They're the ones, Tom Patterson is the guy who wrote the book. He has the patent, the original patent on the ATM machine. He's the one that came up with Space Mountain for the Disney brothers and presented it to them in their office. He's the one that came up with how they figured out how to do the talking Mr. Lincoln. He helped do the lunar lander module for McDonnell Douglas and helped design the DC-8. He was a big idea kind of guy. And he designed the life plan process and the strategic opportunity process. He worked in that whole field. Secondary ideas are people who take a big idea and make it better. And so some people came along after Tom invented the ATM and said, if we make it like this, it's easier to use. And they take a big idea and they work on how to make this thing work better. Somebody comes up with a great idea for a new way to do church. And then somebody who's a secondary idea comes along and says, and here's how we'll do the worship, and here's how we'll do the children's, and here's how we'll do all this kind of stuff. Some of us are people, that's the motivation. If I can't work with people, forget it. I work out of my house, and so when I'm not doing a life plan, I'm in my office by myself. After about 6 hours, I got to go to Starbucks because I got to see some people. That's how I work. That's how I get things done. And my mantra is, my fruit grows on other people's trees. I'm going to always accomplish things. That's the reality is I'm going to accomplish things through other people. That's my comfort zone, is working with people. And then there's some people who just like to work with things. They're the machinists of the world. They're the carpenters of the world. They're the artists of the world who take great joy in creating something out of something physical. So, which is your comfort zone? Which do you think is your comfort zone? So any primary leaders in here? Yeah, question?
So what do you feel like you fit well into?
There's some overlap once in a while, and I will, if we were doing a life plan together, I'd push you and say, okay, so which two? Which two would you think would work best for you? Okay, all right. So and then I'd say to you, so if I could only let you choose one, where do you think you'd land? Okay, and then I'd start asking, so give me some examples of how you'd be a secondary leader. And then I'd say, give me some examples of how contribution is a driver for you. And we'd just kind of follow it up. And if you truly were both, I've seen some people, like I had a guy who was primary leadership and primary ideas and people. because that was, and after we pushed for a while, that was truly where he fit. And so yeah, it's not always, this is not hugely, this is not a set in stone kind of a thing. This is just some guides to help you think through where you are. It's kind of a little more art than science at this point. How many primary leaders in here? 2, 3, 4, 5, okay. How many secondary leaders? Okay. Now, when you're in your younger years, sometimes you're forced into a secondary leader role, and some of you may find that you turn into a primary leader as time goes on, or some of you truly may be secondary leaders, and if you are, you'll be happy being an associate in a church, but only if you can lead something. How many image people? Okay, couple? Yeah. They're the neat ones in the class. How many contribution people? Okay, all right. And see, it's not like there's a right or wrong to this. We need every single one of those or the world falls apart. The church needs every single one of these people. How about primary ideas? Any primary idea people? Okay. In your image and primary ideas, you're going to come up with some original ad campaigns. You're going to come up with some ways of doing stuff. It'll be interesting to watch that come out in you. How about secondary ideas? Okay. All right, you're going to make things better. That BASF commercial, we don't make things, we make things better. That's the kind of the mantra of secondary idea people. How many people? Okay? All right? If push comes to shove, you'll always choose people over any of those other things, right? And then anybody who's things? Okay? All right? And you'll find that, you might find that you're as you're looking at jobs, something like going to a mission field, to being a missionary aviation pilot, or something where you can get your hands dirty once in a while, that may really appeal to you in the whole process of ministry. So just use that as kind of a thought starter for you. Then we move to, and this is a fun one, but I find that pastors and church people are terrible at taking care of themselves. The importance of this is you can minister one of two ways. You can minister out of fullness and plenty, or out of emptiness. And most ministers minister out of emptiness. They've given some more, and they ain't got nothing left to give. And when that happens, you lose margin in your life. You lose the ability to tolerate people. You get angry at the wrong times. And so one of the things that we always focus on in a life plan is to say, what is your replenishment cycle? And so as we sat down, I need every morning from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. by myself. I get up at between 4:30 and 5. I put the coffee pot on. I don't know how Apostle Paul could have devotions without coffee, but then I have my quiet time, and I have my thinking time, and if I have to write anything, I write. And at 6 o'clock, people start coming out. My grandkids come out because we live with 4 generations in our house, and so my grandkids start coming out, and I start having fun with them. But I need that time, or my day is shot. I need exercise. For the first time in my life since high school, it made sense for me to exercise. When my life planner said to me, if you die because you're fat and you're out of shape and your heart gives out early, you won't accomplish what God has called you to do. And for the first time, I put exercise and keeping my body in shape in a theological framework that made sense to me. Because I can't accomplish God's will for my life if I don't take time to replenish. I need to hike and fish. Now, I'd love to do it 2 times a month. That's an aspiration at this point. If I get to do it once a month, I'm feeling pretty good about it. I need to read some novels because that's where I turn my brain off. I don't like to watch TV very much, but I love to read novels. And it's got to be a military thriller. It's got to be Tom Clancy, Dale Thor, Vince Flynn. Anybody else, any fans out there? No? Okay. I got to do a little bit of woodworking because that helps me be a little bit creative. And then I need to get into some good discussions with some people. Maybe a little bit of actual verbal scrapping to keep me stimulated, And so these are my my replenishment cycle. This was Ken's over here. He needs time with God, 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Each time with his wife, one date night, 2 times a month, one overnighter, 1 time a quarter, and devotional time together 1 time a week. He needs to exercise 3 days a week. We hold each other accountable on this all the time because, in fact, we text back and forth. How many times have you been to the gym this week? He needs to go on vacation 4 weeks a year. He needs 30 minutes at the end of his day to wrap up before he goes in, before the family descends on him. He needs a personal retreat when he gets fed up to here. He says, I know when I need to go away. And he needs movies with popcorn twice a month and lots of butter. And then he needs the special time with his kids because they've got a blended family, some adult kids, some 4-year-olds, and they just adopted a Cambodian girl who was rescued out of prostitution, and so it's kind of a strangely blended family. So each one needs special time together. You need to figure out what recharges your batteries, and don't feel bad about recharging, because I guarantee you, if you take 10% of your time to recharge, it's 168 hours in the week. First of all, you need 8 hours of sleep a night. I know the seminary students, that's probably not on your reality thing. You need 8 hours of sleep a night. I mean, there is scientific evidence that says if you don't get 8 hours of sleep a night, your cholesterol is going to go up, your blood pressure is going to go up. I mean, there's all kinds of things that says you need 8 hours of sleep a night. And I can guarantee you, you'll be more effective even in seminary if you get enough rest. Now, I realize, I went through it. I worked 50 hours a week when I was in seminary. I had a kid, and I slept about 3 hours a night for about 7 months. It's not good for you. I can tell you that. It's not good for you. And we do some of those things. But you need to figure out what makes you full and then take time to be that way. It's just really, I really believe that's important, and you ought to start it now. I didn't start it until I was 58, and I wish I'd have started back when I was 28. It makes a difference. Then what are your core values? I was going to have you turn to your partners, but I think we're running a little bit behind, so we'll just keep on trucking. But when you go through core values, don't be lofty. You need something in the specifics that says, this is how it actually is in my life. And I have shed blood over this. I never let people say, there's many of us have aspirational values. I want to be the father of the year, or I want to be reaching lost people all the time. And yet when you look at it, you say, how many people have you really reached? And if you can't say, I've done this, I've shed blood over this, it's probably not a core value. It's probably an aspirational value. This one is one of the things that when we hire church planters, church planters have to like lost people. And so we ask them, how many people have you ever brought to the Lord in your neighborhood or friends that you weren't paid to bring to the Lord? And if somebody says never, anybody, we say, well, it's not going to get any better when you become a church planter. It's just not going to happen. If you don't already know how to bring people to the Lord for free, when you're paid, it's not going to work. And so, those are some of the things where it's just got to be real. And we always make people put then, what does it mean when you say integrity? What does it mean? What does it mean people are of value? What does it mean God's value? So we just press until you come up with a working definition of what that value looks like in your life. Because it's different. I've seen probably 7, integrity is almost one of everybody's values. But everybody defines it a little bit differently. I had a guy say, I'm in public what I am in private. That was his definition of integrity. Another guy said, when I say something's going to get done, it's going to happen. I never go back on my word. That's another definition of integrity. So you need to figure out what you mean by that, and that will give you you'll find that if you really truly have identified your core values, that you live by those. And that'll help you make decisions as you define your core values. Then we come to one about 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the second day when we're all tired. And at this point, if you're at my house, my wife brings in root beer freezes because we need sustenance. But this is a panel that becomes the guiding one of the guiding documents for your life, because it's kind of the things that really count to you. First of all, why do I exist? I'm sure I would change this a little bit now as I go back and renew my life plan in January. But I exist to energize high-impact kingdom leaders. I exist to energize, encourage, connect high-impact leaders in a church multiplication movement. Where I'm headed, what do I see going on? I see a mass movement of people coming back to God through the church multiplication movement. And what's my life mission? What must I do? I must focus on high-impact kingdom leaders, be in a framework that gives me freedom and bandwidth I need to do this, and connect high-impact leaders in small sandboxes to encourage and energize them. When I ended up leaving seminary, I wanted to be preaching in a megachurch. It's kind of one of those things that kind of comes. In a meeting at East 91st Street Christian Church in Indianapolis, God spoke to me as I was walking through the building. They were looking for a preacher at the time, and I thought, I was kind of saying, I'd like to be the preacher here. And God said, that's not what I have for you. You're never going to speak, you're never going to be a megachurch pastor. And I fought that for 10 years of saying, I want to be a megachurch pastor. When Billy Graham retires, I want him to call me and say, I need somebody to come and speak for me. And some of you may be saying, well, that's crazy. But, we all have these little dreams in our lives. And it wasn't until I came to peace with that I work best in smaller sandboxes. This is about as big a group as I'm really good with. I'm really better with 8 to 10. If I can sit down with 8 to 10 of you, or if I can sit down one-on-one with you. And so I need to figure out a way. That's my life mission, is I must get involved with individuals on a one-on-one, one-on-two, one-on-10 basis and figure out how to help them produce the fruit that's going to grow on their tree, and my fruit will then grow on their trees. And so this is my life model. And I have to, and that's why I'm doing life planning and strategic opportunity planning, because I work best when I can get leaders in a small sandbox and energize them and take care of them and move them on to the next level. Now, to do that, I need to have some health drivers. And this actually isn't in your book. If you want a copy of this life panel, I'll be glad to send it to you. Send me an email at marcus.bigelow@gmail.com, and I'll send you a copy of it. But you need to figure out what needs to be healthy in order for this to accomplish. And this becomes kind of my marching orders for my life. That I'm about church multiplication, I'm about people coming back to God, and I'm about high-impact leaders in small groups. So to do that, I got to have some connections with some high-impact leaders. You can't lead people if you can't get next to them. I've got to make sure that I take care of my replenishment cycle, because if I die prematurely, I can't accomplish God's purpose. I need to have intimacy with God, because if I'm not connected to God, how can I ever possibly help in the small sandbox to connect anybody to God? I need to have passion for what I'm doing, and that's not too hard for me to do. You notice that was a green. And I need to be focused, because I'm an opportunity guy on that thinking wavelength. I can come up with 73 things that we could do tomorrow that would be a lot of fun. I mean, literally, if we sat down and you said, tell me 73 things that we could do tomorrow that would really be cool, I could do it. It'd take me a half an hour, and I'd come up with 75 things. Not a problem. But I need to sit down and focus and say, I'm about high-impact leaders in small sandboxes, encouraging them so that their fruit can grow on my fruit can grow on their trees. And I have to focus on that and not get distracted. So those were my things that needed to be healthy in order for me to accomplish this. Then on the other side, there's some things that'll sabotage it. And you know what those are in your life, and I know what those are in mine. Pride and need of recognition. I am an approval addict through and through. And I have to continually lay that before the Lord and say, God, my approval comes from you, not from other people. And then tomorrow I have to say the same thing. And like I told you guys at lunchtime today, whoever smiles at me gets my attention. Workaholism and lack of margin in my life. If that doesn't happen, my life tanks. Fear of rejection and the need for approval. It's somewhat connected here, but there's a pride that needing to be recognized up here. This is just needing to be approved. And then impatience. I want it to happen, and I want it to happen now. And not everything happens immediately. Some of these things, and we always put in a red, yellow, or a green. Red means you better deal with it right now or you're in big trouble. We put an arrow, whether it's getting better, getting worse, or staying the same. And yellow means you better pay attention to this or pretty soon you're going to be in trouble. Green means things are go. And you just need to keep turning that flywheel and making it work better. Does that make sense? Yes?
I get the arrows on the health driver's side. What are the arrows on the risk? They don't seem to be pointing to anything to me.
They're pointing down, up, or level. Up means they're getting better. Down means they're getting worse. And level, I don't have any levels over here. I had some levels over there. Levels mean that they're just kind of as is. They're not getting better. They're not getting worse. If I had a red, I had a red that was going down. It really meant that my replenishment cycle was almost non-existent when I did my life plan. That wouldn't be, I need to go back and do this, because that would now be probably at least a yellow going up and maybe even a green. This one, it might be a yellow. I'm doing a little better than I was at that point. I really needed to be recognized. I needed people to know that I was doing a good job at that point. And God knew it, but, you know.
It's getting better, Marcus, and you're proud of it.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. They gave me a medal for it, and I wore it, so they took it away. So does that make sense? This is kind of your marching order sheet. This is maybe one of the most important sheets that we do in a life plan. And unfortunately, they developed this construct after they wrote the book, and so it's not in the book. But I would be more than happy to share this with you if you need it. Then we come to a section after we've done all this stuff. We've spent now till 2 o'clock on the second day. Now we say, okay, so you've got 4 vocational options that facing you. You know, you've got some things that you can do. What does it look like? And so this happened to be my accountability partner. He had 4 different options with his company that he could do. We then take and we put all those 4 options up here on the top. And then we take his life story, his talents, his heart, his thinking, his frontal lobe, his purpose, vision, and mission, and his core values. And we run them down through there. And we say, okay, so does staying with the status quo fit your life story? Yeah. And it was all green. Now, chances are he's not going to put something, very many times are you going to have something that's going to be a lot of reds. Because hopefully you've been smart in what you're choosing. He had a yellow here. It was kind of, I let him fudge a little bit. He said, well, it's really yellow-green. And I usually don't do that. This one had a couple of yellows, a couple of greens. This one had, and so then when you get down to the bottom, you kind of say, okay, so what's the most logical thing for you to do with your life at that point? And so he came out saying, we can stay status quo. We go with the Hargroves. Those are the best fits. Maybe going with Blake, that could be a fit as well. So then we went to the vocational gating process. And again, I apologize because these are just recent constructs that have been developed. They're not in the book. If you get to this point and you're saying, yeah, I really want to do it, I'll be glad to help you with that. But you come up with some things like, what are the major things that without which you're not going to do a job? And so one of his was, I want to live in Rockland. He said, I'm not moving. So for all 3, it was green. But for this salmon, we didn't know whether Kurt Solomon would let him continue to live in Rockland or whether he'd have to move to New York City. We really didn't know. So we ultimately had too many questions about that last one, so we just kind of left it blank. It has to have freedom to run the company. It has to have flexibility and family balance. Has to have adequate capital. Has to agree with the purpose and vision of the company, and with his purpose and vision and mission. There are some travel things that if he has to travel more than that much, the job's not going to work. And so you need to sit down, if you're thinking through jobs, say, what are the things that if you take them away from me, I'm going to quit, or if I have to violate these and have to do some things that violate these, it's just not going to work. Those are major gates. And then you come down and there's some minor gates. In this particular case, one of them was that he was being asked to think about a partnership with an unbeliever. So is he equally yoked? That was kind of a minor gate, because he said, if I enter a yoking, I'd prefer to be equally yoked, but if I enter this, I can always quit and walk away and lose my investment. And I'm willing to do that if push comes to shove and I can't live my values. The one with the most resources, that's a minor gate. One guy's going to bring maybe $1 billion and one's going to only bring half or $500,000 or $500 million. And then culture alignment. You know, which company am I going to fit best with if I take my company to this? And so in ministry, it may be something totally different. But you take and you begin to take the jobs that you have and the options you have, and you begin to work them through these things until you come up with this is what fits me best. When I did it, I had an option that had one where it was a red. I think it was on my purpose, vision, mission. Everything else was a green, but there was one red. And then when I got done, he wrote on the bottom of the chart, one red means it's dead. And I said, why? He said, well, why would you choose something that was so obviously out of harmony with your purpose, vision, and mission? I mean, why would you choose something that is a red that you can't change? It's irrevocable. This is never going to fit with your vision and mission and values. Fit with everything else. But I went there to this life plan almost positive that I was going to take that job. And it became really apparent as I began to go through this that it didn't fit me. I could have taken that. I might have been able to get that job. But I can see now, 2 years in reverse, it was a job at an academic institution. I can't stand the process of academia. It drives me crazy. If they want to change from 2-ply to 4-ply toilet paper, somebody's got to write a white paper on it. And then you've got to have three different committees vote on whether you're going to have 2-ply or 4-ply paper. And then it's still up for grabs. That drives me crazy. I'm an entrepreneur. I want to say, look, we chose 4-ply paper, and that's how it's going to be. If I had gone, and actually that wasn't the conflict here. The conflict was that all my life is about church multiplication, and at the academic institution I was looking at, that would only have been a little teeny piece of the puzzle, and the rest of it would have been about other things that are good things but are not about church multiplication. And so that really helped me figure out that I shouldn't take that job or I was going to be unhappy. And now as I've gotten a little perspective on it, it sounded good. So use this kind of a vocational gating process to say, okay, this is how we can do it. Now, having got all that done, we then do, I didn't put a wind wheel in. Over there on the corner, you can see what we do is we circle around back to the charts. And that little wind wheel, wind stands for what's important now. And so we go around the charts on the wall. Every place we see a red, we say, okay, so that needs to be up on the wind wheel. That's pretty important if it's a red. That's a pretty important thing. And then after we do that, then we come up with a life plan initiative profile. And it doesn't take long to do these because we've already spent the whole prior 2 days doing this. So this takes probably 45 minutes to an hour. Being a number 8 on the thinking wavelength, this is the hardest one. I fall asleep during these. If you're a 2 or a 1, you'll think this is where we really get the work done. But in his case, intimacy with God was a big thing. And so he needed to have real joy and passion and love in my relationship with God. Needed to research. Oh, this was mine. Needed to research and attend a spiritual retreat program. I thought this was Ken's. Need to try writing longhand in the morning. Never have gotten to that. Needed to talk about Jan helping me in this way. That's my wife. I did. She's helping me muchly, or a lot. Sorry. Need to pray for and pursue a spiritual mentor. And I have done that, and I have pursued a spiritual mentor and gotten into a relationship where that is helping me. And so we put a date. When am I going to accomplish these by? Now, one of the things, if you're doing this on your own, there's a phenomenon called the pig and the python. You know, you've seen pictures of where a python swallows a pig whole, and you get this big bulge. What happens is people say, man, I can get all these things done in the next 3 weeks. And the reality is you can't. So they need to spread that out and avoid the pig and the python syndrome. But you go through and you figure out what are the important things that need to be, what are the next steps? And if, you know, it's usually 6 or 7, what did I have, 7 there? 7 is about as many as you can handle on an action plan. Because if you get too many, you just ignore them all. I mean, you know how it is when you get way too many things to do, you just begin to ignore it. And you say, I'll get to it later because it's too much to do right now. Whereas if you have a reasonable list, now what I've done is now I go back every New Year's Day and I revamp my list of life plan initiative profiles, and I come up with new action initiatives, because some of these I finished. And you just have my old copy. You don't have my new copy on this one. But that's kind of the management of your life plan kind of a thing. That's where the rubber meets the road. Now, the tendency of people is to do a life plan and then stick it on the shelf. And I guarantee you, if you do it like that, it won't be any good to you. You've got to have something that you can use. We actually, when we finish this, we do what's called a life plan on a page, where we take kind of a little snapshot of several of these charts and put them on one page that's 11 by 17, and I can pull it out and I can look at my life plan and I can say, oh, that's not going well. Oh, that's changed. Oh, I got to do this. And it keeps me able to review it in just a very short period of time. And I keep my life plan on my desk all the time. And at least twice a week I pull it out and start looking through it and saying, okay, what do I need to be doing? It's made a world of difference in my life. And then you need a partnership of people that you work with. You know, we encourage people to have somebody that holds them accountable. And so I've got my wife and my accountability partner who holds me accountable. You need somebody else that's a mentor. And I didn't have any mentors at the time that were active mentors, and I have now replaced that with Bryce Jessup. You need some friends. I encourage everybody to share their life plan with a couple of friends, because as you go through it with somebody, you'll find that you learn it better and you help them get some ideas. But when you teach somebody something, you always learn it better than when you just hear it yourself. And that's the same thing that happens when you share your life plan with somebody. It becomes much more, you've kind of made it public and now you have to follow through on it. And then you need some proteges, somebody that you're helping to move to the next step, because all of us need to be bringing somebody along with us in our process. And so I encourage everybody to, as that's part of this process of doing. And then every New Year's Day during the Rose Bowl, I pull out my life plan and I go through, coming up in a couple of months, and I go through and say, what changes do I need to make? I used to use it for my financial renewal, because you can watch a football game and do 2 or 3 other things at the same time, and it's okay. If you don't have too much beer. So what's the next step in your journey? Actually, I don't drink beer, so I had to throw that in. What's the next step in your journey? Here's a couple things I think you can do. Read Living the Life You're Meant to Live. There's everything you need to do the basics of a life plan in that. If you choose to do it that way, then find a partner. You may choose to do the Michael Hyatt one. That may fit your personality better. That's okay too. You may find 6 other books in the library on life plans. Just find something that works for you. Find something that fits you, because again, we're all different and one size doesn't fit all. Then commit to do it, and then find someone to hold yourself accountable. Because it just isn't going to happen if you try to do it by yourself for most of us. Most of us just aren't disciplined enough to get it done without some help. If you're a number 1 or number 2, you may say, well, I don't need any help, and you might not need any help. But if you're a 3 or a 4 or a 5 or a 7 or a 9, you're going to need some help to get that thing done. Yeah, John.
Marcus, I'm kind of curious if my friend and I both really want to pursue putting on paper once and for all a life plan. What's it like, would you suppose, or maybe you have experience with it, where 2 people are really chiseling out a life plan simultaneously? You know, I'm providing accountability and feedback for him, he's providing it for me, and we're working through this process together over a couple of weeks.
I have to say I don't know how that works, because I've never had it done. After I did my life plan, I immediately went to one of my friends and said, let me show you what I've done, and let me see if I can help you work through some of it. And the first life plan I did, it's kind of embarrassing now to look at it because it was pretty rookie. But I just kind of did the same stuff that I've just gone through with you, and I just kind of said, okay, how about this for you? How about this for you? How about this for you? And I think you could do that with somebody else, and then they could turn around and do it with you. I don't know whether it'd be better to do it simultaneously or whether it'd be better to walk through it completely and then come back around and walk through it completely again. My sense is that it's probably better to do it one all the way through and then start over again and do the other one. When I do couples, I never do life plan for women. It's way too intimate. There's way too much chance for transference. And so I just don't do life plans for women. But I will do couples if the husband agrees to stay in the room while the wife's life plan is being done. Now, she has to feel comfortable with everything that's gone on in her life, and sometimes that doesn't take place. But I find it better to do all of a husband's life plan and then all of a wife's life plan, or vice versa, than it is to alternate back and forth. Because you get a flow going, and I think that really works well. Questions? Does this sound, let me ask you this. Does this sound like something that is doable? Or does it sound like, whoa, you just laid a whole ton of stuff on us and I'm going home and taking a nap? I hope it's doable. I think there's a value, one of the reasons I facilitate life plans is because I think there's a value in having a guide who's been through it before. It took me 5 or 6 life plans before I felt comfortable and went from being just slavishly connected to this to listening to the person. If you're going to choose a partner, it needs to be somebody that you can trust and somebody you can tell the truth to and somebody who will tell the truth to you. Because if you come off and say, this is my values, and that person goes, come on, give me a break. You're not like that at all. You need to be able to hear some truth in the process. If you don't want to hear truth, don't do a life plan. But find somebody you can trust.
How do you think this works with, say, a church staff? Like would you share your life plan with the staff so that they're able to kind of understand where you're going in your life, or what you're good at, or how much of your life plan? Because I've seen this before where you do like a life map, where you've mapped out where you've come from and where you're looking to go towards. But I've never seen it like as intimately, shown as.
You have to judiciously choose what you're going to share with the staff. It's amazing what people tell me. And, you have to be careful. And I always say, you got to make sure that the people you're going to share this with can hear all of it. Especially when there's, if it's like a senior guy and he's thinking, I may leave tomorrow and go plant, go drill water wells, which is my life goal. Well, you could shake a staff up pretty heavily if you dropped into a staff meeting and said, oh, hey, by the way, guys, I'm going to go drill water wells. So I always say you got to be judicious. You got to be wise in how you share this with people, and choose your audience well. I mean, my accountability partner, I'd share anything on my life chart with. My staff, I'd share 95% of what's in my life plan. Joe Blow off the street, I'd tell him I have a life plan. You don't cast your pearls before swine. You don't share things with people that are intimate if they might use them against you. Just be wise about it. But the other side of the coin is truth sets you free. Secrets bind us. Truth frees us. And that really does happen in all areas of life. So be judicious, but be bold at the same time. Don't be scared to share everything. A couple of ways that I think this would really work well. If you've got a staff person, well, first of all, if you're searching, and you're trying to figure out what do I do with my life, what am I going to be when I grow up, this is a really helpful process. That's kind of where it was for me. Second is, if you've got a staff person who just is giving you fits, a life plan will do one of two things for them. Maybe you'll come through the life plan and they'll say, I am in the wrong position, but if you move me over here, I could really be energized. And you'll get the right person in the right seat. That's a win for your staff and for the kingdom. Or maybe they'll come back from a life plan and they'll say, I just don't fit here. There's nothing about this that works with my life plan, and I need to leave. But if they leave having thought through all of this stuff, they can leave with peace, and they don't create a church split. And that's a win for the kingdom. And you get somebody in to replace them who it does fit with. And so I think there's some value in some of that kind of thing, of saying it helps people figure out where they are, if they're in the right spot, if they're even on the right bus. And so those are some things that I would my contact information, I think, is on the brochure that you got. Unfortunately, the brochure says it's marcusbigelow.com/life planning. There ain't no such thing as /life planning. It's just marcusbigelow.com. There will be shortly, but not right now. But my process and costs and all that sort of stuff are on my website. If some of you need a life plan, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about it. If you can do it by yourself, I'd be more than happy to help you. But if, I look at it and I say, it was the best investment that my company ever made for me, my ministry ever made for me. And it helped them that I didn't walk out 2 years premature, because I would have walked out 2 years premature. So it was a good win. So I think it's a valuable thing to do. Thank you. And John, thank you for letting me come.